Hello everyone and welcome to the Sideboard here at the Dallas Standard Open. I'm here with David Thomas.
What's up?
Dave's playing one of the most maligned and most successful archetypes of the Return to Ravnica standard season here, Bant Control. Nothing too crazy or scary, pretty much just Reduce list, right?
It's not exactly a Reduce list. There are a couple changes I made based on what I expected the field to be. I mean, I loved his original 75 from the Invitational, but there are things I think that had to be changed based on the way the metagame shifted.
Sure. Especially here in Texas, where
everything's more aggressive.
Yeah, everything's just crazier. But what we really want to talk about is just, I think, the role of this deck. We may be saying farewell to it for all we know. Like once Gatecrash comes out, things could change.
I think once Gatecrash comes out, Esper's gonna probably fully replace his deck. I mean. This deck could still show up because the aspect of having Thragtusk, but Esper gets the lands at once, and we don't know what other cards have shown up. So there are lots of things
that could definitely just change a lot. The core of the deck has remained basically the same, even down to the Singleton and Master components. A card a lot of people debate over whether or not they want. I know you said you're a fan.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. As long as I'm playing Augur of Bolas, I like the Master. Reed Duke sold it to me the first time he made top 8, like when he had the split, and I started playing with the deck. Okay. Like the Master components kept showing up on the Augur, and if it had been a Jace, like a lot of people wanted it to be originally, then it would have missed. And that came up a lot actually.
Sure. And
it digs, and you want it to dig.
All right. I think that this deck can also be said to be responsible for Jace the Memory Adept just becoming like a real card, I think, in the format. Like it started with the one Drown Yard and Elixir, then to get advantage, you went to a second Drown Yard as you have here, and then now Jace Wars are like really common in Standard.
It's so important in the control decks that do exist right now. There aren't very many haymakers. A lot, especially in the Bant mirror, where you're just Thragtusking for each other back and forth. You really need something that can come down, can't be answered, and just can win you the game almost entirely on the spot.
I think it's even been a strong Planeswalker against a lot of the Naya decks, which have to board out threats to board in more answers for your cards, and then they just find themselves threatened by a Jace really strangely.
Yeah, you play a slow control game. And then instead of relying on one creature attacking over and over, you just play the Jace. If you need to, you can draw and draw the extra cards. But in like 4 or 5 turns, you just win the game.
Yeah. Speaking of creatures, one of the things that makes Bant Control an interesting deck is its reliance on them, as opposed to Esper Control, which runs like 3 Augurs and 1 Snapcaster or something crazy like that. This deck has always run the full amount of Thragtusk for defense. Sometimes run Angel, sometimes run Augur. And then in the sideboard, we have more creatures. I think the discovery of Rock's Faithmender was one of the things that even made this deck stay successful over the long term.
Yeah, it's really important, specifically for like the zombie and red deck matchups, because like going Faithmender, Farseek into Faithmender into Thragtusk is just so devastating to them.
Yeah.
Like you can just completely blow them out of the water. Then you're setting up for a Sphinx's Revelation for maybe 5. They gains you 10 life, draw 5. It's just so devastating to a lot of these aggressive decks. Like they just can't deal with that sort of a life swing.
And including Silklash Spider, which I think is the man for the job when it comes to defending against Thundermaw Hellkite.
Yeah, I love him against Thundermaw and Falconwrath Aristocrat.
Yep, very good there too. I think that Bant's sideboard is actually one of the things I've always liked most about it. The main deck, very strong core, does the same thing. It's really just built to do one exact thing very consistently.
Yeah.
But then in the sideboard, you get to switch in some cards that are really just haymakers in their own matchups. We already talked about Rock's Faithmender, the Jaces, Rest in Peace against any of the decks that are graveyard reliant. Very strong card. And moving in on these counter spells, getting rid of the actual removal spells against other control decks.
Yeah.
I think that Bant is one of the decks that can just successfully transform itself.
Yeah, it's a really strong deck. It's able to not leave, in most games, not leave cards you don't need in those matches. It's really good to make sure that all the cards you're playing with are good in all these matchups. Like all the sideboard cards are always going to be good. Like the aggro decks, when they have Cavern of Souls, you just board out your Dissipates, board in another pile of removal, and you just set up for the long game.
Sure. I think that it's really the card draw that makes it work that way.
Sphinx's Revelation is the core of this deck. Without this card, this is not a deck. Like Esper could exist without Sphinx's Revelation, but this deck, Bant cannot.
I'd never thought of it that way, but yeah, you're right for sure. the Esper deck has like lots of ways to actually accrue advantage. It leans on Planeswalkers and Forbidden Alchemy interactions and stuff like that. But this deck this is the only spell that does the job.
Yeah, you like the first Sphinx's Revelation into the second is usually where you start to take over the game.
Sure.
It's such a swing.
Well, we've got Gatecrash coming out very, very soon, so this might be our last weekend with Bant Control as a dominant player in the metagame. So we'll see if it has what it takes to maybe put up one last performance. Right?
Maybe.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, David.
Thank you.
And we'll be back with more Standard.